Welcome. I'm a guitar nerd, and I'm also a longtime sufferer of loving tube amps and not being able to play them loud. So I've gotten into this world of load boxes and impulse responses. And I got into it by way of first building my own attenuator, and that works great. And then I bought a Captor X for silent recording and silent practice headphones, so I don't disturb my 1-year-old and my wife and neighbors and all that jazz. And I really enjoyed the Captor X. I think it's a really, really cool unit. Form factor is amazing. Software is amazing. Tonally, I was hunting for something, though. I found I wasn't using the Dyne IRs from Two Notes. I had a bunch of impulse responses from other companies that I was enjoying. So when I saw the St.Rock Reactor 2 pop up, it enticed me as a unit that, from my understanding, would be a little bit actually more accurate to the impulse response curve of like a 4x12 cabinet that I would be interested to hear. So I took a risk and I just ordered one, and I've been really happy with it. And I think it's a really cool unit. St.Rock's been really good to work with me and take ideas of mine into consideration, and I've been a bit of a nuisance for them, sorry. But I really think this product is awesome and has a lot of room to grow. I think it can fit in the market in a really interesting way. So I'm going to focus on this video on a few things that make the Reactor 2 unique and exciting and could be the right thing for you. So coming from the world of Captor X, you could move microphones around on 2 different cabinets of the Dyne IRs, or you could blend 2 third-party IRs and make a mix. And that's cool. That's awesome. That worked really well. One thing with it was that it's mono, straight down the middle. That's your only option. And for most uses, that's all you need, and that's perfect. But there's sometimes when you might want to play around with some stereo stuff. You might want more than 2 IRs blended. So that's one thing that I think the St.Rock Reactor 2 does in a really interesting way. And so I'm going to show you that first. So here we go, popping open the IR block. And first thing you're going to see here is a pretty bonkers quad IR preset. But I'm actually only using 3 in this one. And so what I'm doing here is I am taking a York Audio Mesa 4x12 oversize in already a blended mix of microphones, and I've got that on the left side, and the dial on the left here slides between whatever IR you've got loaded in the top box and in the bottom box. So I've got it 100% to the top, so it's just fully the York Audio 4x12 oversize. Yeah, so this is like a heavy metal thing. I'm on a Mesa 4x12 kick. On the right side, I've got a Cali traditional 2001 speaker, so it's a little bit of a tighter sound, less boomy, more focused. And I've got 2 microphones blended 50-50. I've got a SM57 off from the center of the speaker a fair bit, and then I've got a M160 ribbon on the same type of cabinet, actually on the same speaker, bottom left from this IR pack, and I've got it a little more closer to the center. So basically I'm kind of creating my own mix of a traditional Mesa cabinet on one side and a oversized on the other side, and I just chose a default. It doesn't really matter what's on this one since it's all the way turn to the top. And so you have a lot of interesting things you can do here. So this width control is the left-right spread. So if you want it to be stereo, if you want the oversize on the left and the traditional on the right, you're going to move the width to 100%. But if I want to stereo collapse it into a mono, then you dial the width to 0 or anywhere in between, and you're going to pull that stereo field together. So that's just such a neat feature to have. So I'll show you a little chug-a-chug, full stereo spread of the IR. And you can collapse it to the mono. So that's neat. So I'll show you something else that I thought was so cool. I'll show you it with, let's do with the blue. So these are Celestion IRs. When you buy Celestion IR packs, they come with single mic captures, blended captures, and then they have room mics. And I haven't really been able to use the room mics in any sort of reasonable way. So I thought this was a really neat way, using this quad IR thing, that I could incorporate some of those room mics. So again, I have the width quite wide, full spread. So whatever's on this side goes on the left, whatever's on this side goes on the right. So I've put a 121-57 mic blend on a Blue Alnico 2x12 with a 60% favor, and the 40% on that side is a room microphone. So I'm actually getting just shy of 200 milliseconds of room reflection that is actually captured by a microphone, not a reverb post. And I just think that's so cool that I can incorporate those in an IR that I can play live or I can record with direct from this device. So I can choose the exact same IR on the other side, a low gain 121-57. And so what would happen there is these would sum to fake like a mono in the middle, which is totally awesome. But if you want to spread it out just a little bit, you can choose one of the other ones that are similar. So same speaker with a different mic blend, and that'll just kind of spread out the middle a little bit. And then same thing, I got 60% favor of that close mic blend, and then I can choose the right room sound. So I've got the actual left and right rooms that were captured. I'll give you a little idea of what that might sound like. And then you can always lengthen it with some sort of reverb. That's just super neat. And other modes, you can just do a single IR, and you can load up tons of IRs into this thing. There's a source left and right. So that's another thing that's interesting with this device. I don't know if I'll use it, but I could see other people really being into it, is it has an effects loop that's mono send, stereo return. So this matters if you're using those returns. If you have it straight up the middle and you're not using the returns, I think it just equally returns on both left and right. So, but if you just patched in an effect, like you say you had a mono effect and you just patched it in, it's like your favorite delay and you wanted it post power amp, pre-IR, you could do that, and then you would say patch it from the send to the left return, and then just source it all the way to the left, and then you can load your IR, and then it'll bring it up down the middle, but it'll be sourced from the left side. So like stuff like that. There's some really interesting ways you can play around with this that it's just totally unique. Okay, and then you have the dual IR. So they're IR import process is really good, and it levels any IR you bring in, just normalizes them. So they're all at equal volume. You don't get any weird jumps going from IR to IR. It phase aligns everything. Works great. It sounds really good. Truncates any long IRs, sets them to the right bit rate. Like, it just deals with everything. So they did a great job with that. So if you want to blend like a mono IR, but you want like a SM57 and a Royer 121, but you want, 75% 57, 25% 121. So say the left one was the 57, this one was a 121. So mono, you're going to dial width back. And then if you wanted mostly SM57, keep the input left high, and then you would dial the 121 down. And you can kind of balance them as you want. But so you're going to use those input gains to balance a mono blend of IRs in the dual IR mode. So that's kind of like an interesting way of thinking. Wasn't totally intuitive to me at first, but it totally gets the job done. So that's the IR stuff that I thought was really interesting, that really unique, being able to choose, 1 IR, 2 IR, 4 IRs, and the things you can do about it and how creative you could get with it. I think that's really neat. So I'm happy that's in there. All right, up next, I want to highlight the digital signal processing, the stereo effects that they gave us with this box. I think that is so neat that that's included. And I know some people would use a load box strictly as a recording tool, where they're going to just load up their tube amp, get a dry signal of their tube amp out into their workstation, and then slap IRs and effects there on that dry signal. And that's awesome. But the fact that we have this other option is really useful and really neat. And I only recently realized that this thing actually works when it's connected over USB as an audio interface, which kind of blew my mind. I didn't really realize that. I know a lot of devices are doing that these days. I just didn't think this one would. And that's super neat. So right now I'm actually capturing the line outputs, stereo line outputs from the reactor through the USB on the back of the reactor straight into my computer. And it freed up a microphone input for this microphone on my Audient. So you can then use all these cool stereo effects, and you can run the line out with all those stereo effects straight into your DAW. And then I think the thing that makes this more interesting and more unique, and what entices me about it, and what I hope this device can kind of lean into for some people, and for me, is using it as a live tool. The effects in it are streamlined, but are quality and have some really interesting features in them. And I think they would lend themselves really well to live performance, to a silent stage, to a reduced volume stage, to people who play at, churches or other places of worship, or put on plays and musicals. People who still want to use the tube amp that they have or that the venue has, but now they can adapt it to a silent stage to create like a really interesting wide guitar sounds that you couldn't before with just one mic thrown in front of your amp. So I want to talk about some of those effects and brief highlight on each one, but then I just want to show the things about those effects that make them really interesting and make them Exciting to me. I own an HX Stomp. I own a bunch of pedals. I build pedals. So I love effects. I use lots of plugins, but there's some things about this that I think are really cool. So to start, noise gate, super handy. I like on a lot of the effects, they've built in this link function. So anything that I do to the left side happens to the right side. So super useful, just to keep things tidy. But if for some reason, you need it to unlink because you're doing something different on this side, sweet, you can unlink it, and that's cool too. But you can just relink it, boom. So gate works pretty good, can work pretty quick. A little bit of a stutter if it's like in between on a threshold, but that only really happens with a super high gain tone and if you're right on the threshold. So if you dial it right, works amazing. I'm very happy with it. So that's the gate. The EQ is crazy, and I think it's going to get crazier. But even as it stands, super neat, super powerful. So I'm coming from the Captor X where I actually felt quite limited by the EQ. There was some moves that I wanted to do with the EQ that it wouldn't really let me do because it was such a fixed EQ. This EQ you can do whatever you want with. You can choose peak, high cut, low cut, bandpass, notch, low shelf, high shelf, frequency, and the Q. And you can do that for each one of these bands, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 band EQ. So you can set each one however you want to whatever frequency you want. And then you dial it right now in 1 dB increments, but we're pitching for them to make it a little more fine because 1 dB can be a bit of a jump in some cases, but yeah, it would be nice. If it was half a dB, that would be most excellent. But anyways, so you can do some really cool creative things on here and really hone in your EQ. I just think it's such a good feature to have in there, and just nuts that it's so flexible. You just do whatever you want with it. Wet, dry, blends. This one doesn't link for some reason, but I don't care. Okay, compressor. Hard or soft mode. Ratio kind of goes into bonkers land. So I would only really use it subtly, but pretty full-featured compressor. Great that that's in there. Okay, here's where things get kind of crazy. So those were pretty mono effects, right? But you have the ability to dial them for the left and the right sides, but they're not like exciting stereo effects, right? Oh yeah, and I should say for the EQ, the link mode works for this too. Like that's just wicked. But you can unlink it and you can have different EQ on either side. Nuts. Okay, modulation. So you have a number of different modes in here, and they all sound really cool and really good. So they're just different types of choruses. Dimension is particularly neat. Yeah, just really nice sounding chorus. So I like Dimension, and I also like to just use the Simple and drop it down pretty low and simple here. No feedback, no low cut. And I use it just as basically a stereo spreader. I think that works really cool as like a doubler. nice and simple. Tremolo. So the fact that they included our harmonic trem, that's dope, super cool. Pan, normal harmonic, normal pan. I don't know, it's neat. So then the other thing that's super cool about the mod and the delays is that you can sync them. So if you click sync, you can choose on what beat division you want to sync that chorus and trem. And then you have the ability to tap tempo up here and the rates change. You can also hook up a MIDI controller and you can tap CCs and the rate will change. And it also, in a recent update, will accept a whole number MIDI clock. So in terms of a live performance tool, this is what I'm saying. It's super neat and I could see it being really useful for people. I could show up to a gig with a controller, a tube amp, and this Reactor 2 with some presets loaded up, and I'd have a wicked stereo spread to front of house, and I could play a show. Yeah, and if you notice, I'm just clicking this little button, but you can also click the power button on each tab, but I asked them to put it on the little button because I don't want to have to open up everything if I just want to turn it on and off from here. So that was a neat thing they did for me. And then the delay. So the delay it's got a couple modes and it's pretty complex. But I think it's amazing. I think it sounds great. I think it's super useful. So I'm just going to play. So it's got two delays, a dual delay here. So you can choose how they're synced. So I've got a quarter note and a dotted eighth. Sweet. So as I tap tempo, they change. That's sick. High cut, low cut. So how the delays trail off. You can choose that kind of taper, the feedback. It's super neat. And then they have this ducking feature that I helped kind of hone in a little bit. I got them to add the attenuation control because I don't want to duck my delays entirely while I'm playing. So I want, if I'm playing something loud, I want my delays to come down a little bit. And then if I back off, I want my delays to swell up a little bit. I don't want them to totally cut off, and they were cutting off before. So this is super cool. So I'll do a little kind of lead tone thing here. So while I'm playing the thing, it's not going to get in the way, and then when I stop, I get a nice bloom, right? That just sounds cool. And then, yeah, they have the modulation as well. So you can choose the depth, the rate, and again, like the mod section, kind of how stereo it is, how it works in terms of phase relationship between the left and the right and how it's moving, the modulation. I haven't played much with the quad. I am overwhelmed by it. I don't know when I would ever need 4 delays. But hey, maybe you need 4 delays. And you got them. Lastly, the reverb. I think the reverb, there's something like beautifully simple about this reverb. You can't really screw it up. I feel like the one that was built into the Captor X, I had to like finagle with to get something that I liked. And there was lots of bad sounds that I could get. And so I've just been finding I like a little bit of like a early reflection reverb that just makes it sound like the amp is in a room, or amp is even in the like a vocal booth to be recorded or whatever, like a kind of dampened, padded, light, but just gives it a feeling like it's an actual amp in a room. A little bit of stereo thing happening, not so dry. Just kind of pleases my ear a little bit. With the reverb, no reverb. Just dry, just this little guy, and all. I don't even have any controls over it. Just early, medium, and then a wet blend. And some of the other ones do have one control that gives you like the decay control. And then obviously you have the wet blend too, so let's make it real spacey. I just think they made some good choices with the reverbs. Yeah, and so again, I mentioned like the MIDI stuff, the fact this thing has MIDI control, it's super useful if you're a live performer. Or if you're just going to have this set up in a way that is annoying to have to connect to it, or you use the front panel to turn on and off things, you can do it with a MIDI controller if you want to run that. You can run a foot switch, just a plain 2-button foot switch, and choose what that does on this thing too. I hope St.Rock embraces these live capabilities and further hone it for that, because I think people will get a real good use out of it for that kind of thing. Currently, when you tap tempo, so say I have this delay, and if I choose a new tempo while the delay is going, there can be artifacts. So, and the modulation, you'll get a little bit of a click when you're changing tempo. So I hope they iron that stuff out. And if they do, they've got a powerhouse of a live machine with this St.Rock reactor too. But as it stands, it's such a cool unit. It's super fun to use. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.